Welcome to the Geek Podcast, where we are the remasters of the universe. I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host, Beej.
He doesn't know what that means.
I don't know what Masters of the Universe is. BJ yelled at me that it's He-Man, so I trust him, but like it's just a little bit too before my time. That's not what we're here to talk about today. We're not talking about He-Man. We're talking about remasters in games, because I've been playing Assassin's Creed 3, the remaster that just came out, because it was part of the season pass, or I might have bought like the digital deluxe edition or something of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Somehow I got this game and I didn't have to pay for it recently. So that's why I've been playing it.
Was it a PS Plus game? I think maybe I got it too. Like, I think it might have been a PlayStation Plus game.
No, it was part of something with... Well, actually, I don't know if Assassin's Creed 3 has ever been a PS Plus game, because if it was, I wouldn't be surprised if they give you this one for free for owning the other one.
Is it a bad game?
No, it's not bad. It's just, I don't know, but this is why I wanted to talk about remasters in general. But okay, let me dive into Assassin's Creed 3 just a little bit up front. So it's been really interesting to go back to it through this remaster, because I'm seeing things that are like core to the series that they have moved on from, but then also other things that like aren't there anymore. And you know, this is very much not level-based and open world like the last two games were. So this is kind of back to like the core of the series, like I used to enjoy a lot. And some of the mission types and some of the gameplay pieces don't even exist anymore in the more modern ones. One of the things I noticed right away is that I just feel like a god now, because I'm not level gated by killing enemies and having to have them within my level range. It's so fun to feel like a true assassin again because of that.
Yeah, I was wondering, because when you said that you felt like a god now, I was like, it's because you can kill people. You can just sneak up behind anybody and kill them again.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about like, oh, it's 2 levels ahead of me, I can't do enough damage. Like, I can just play the game that I want to play. But it also is making me realize, like, I like the open world. I like a lot of the changes they've made. It's just those changes to the way that like assassinations work and the levels that they've put in there that I still feel like I'm fighting against. If I could just, and maybe what I should do is buy the next game on PC and just hack my way around it so that I don't have to deal with levels. Because really, I just wish they didn't exist in the games. But I think I like the open world ones better in a lot of ways.
What?
And this one, I mean, there's a bunch of things with AC3, like the intro to the game is way too long before you even get to the main character. Like, I think I'm 4 or 5 hours into the game and I'm not even at like the point where the main character opens up yet. Like, it's a super long intro. Have you ever like played this game or checked it out?
Not the third one. I actually think that I have it. What I think I did was I bought it on Humble Bundle. It was in one of the bundles that I've got for PC, and I want to play this one because this is the American one, right? This is the American Revolution.
Yeah, and I really like the setting too. Like, I think that I'm a fan of the more modern Assassin's Creed settings, and the further back in time you go, I like some of them. I don't like other ones. It's more hit and miss. But like, as you're getting closer to modern times, like I really liked Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and I really like this game. I liked it at the time too, even though a lot of people didn't. I don't even remember what the complaints were. But yeah, this is the American Revolution, and it's Templars and Assassins. But I can tell you how it works, but if you're going to play the game, it's kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to straight up spoil it. But I will tell you that the intro of the game, there's a huge section where you play as someone who is not the main character, and it eventually ties back in, and you will see very quickly how it ties in and why it ties in. But there's kind of like a twist that happens that takes you from the character you start as in the intro to the main character that you play for the rest of the game. And it's interesting that they did it at the time. It's just too slow.
Yeah, I mean, that really frustrates me in games when I know that what I'm playing... well, let me put it this way. It frustrates me when I'm playing someone that I know is not the main character, where I just keep wanting and waiting to be able to get to the meat of the game because of them advertising that this is what the game is. Do you know going in that this isn't the character who... the primary assassin that you're going to be playing?
No, I mean, if you've seen any of the marketing, you know who it's like right. Connor is the main character. And so when you start the game and you're not Connor, like, you know right away, you're like, something's going on here. But there's nothing that would lead you to believe there's like a huge portion of the game before you get to that character, unless you've played it before, like okay. I have.
And so it's a long way in.
Yeah, it's a long way in. And like, it's not, I mean, I'm not all the way to where it opens up yet, but you do take control of Connor at one point, but he starts out as like a kid and then he's a teenager, and you kind of have to play through all these sequences along the way before you get to the main game. And I'm not even at the main game yet. So like, I want to keep playing to get to that part, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just like skip ahead a little bit. So there's hit and miss parts of this game, but really overall, like, to wrap back into the thought of remasters in general, this made me appreciate both types of games more. Like, I have a better appreciation for the older style games because I've been away from them for so long that I now have a clear picture of what they are and why I liked them and what they're offering that's different. And I like the new games more too. Like, it's not all of the changes they made are bad. And I knew that intellectually, but I hadn't felt it until I went back and tried this game out. And the other thing about the remasters is like the graphics in this one, they're graphic updates and they have that kind of like remaster quality to them where they look a little too smooth and the textures aren't quite detailed enough, and you can tell that it wasn't designed for this resolution. So that's something else that you should be aware of if you're going into that game.
That's actually what I was going to ask about, because some remasters, and one of the things that really kind of puts me off of some of them is that the graphics that they, I don't want to say upscale, but the graphics that they upscale them to are not redone all the time, and so they look really weird on these in this mega high definition running at 4K, but there's a super low polygon model, and this kind of fuzzy, almost fuzzy around the edges is the way it looks sometimes with like the textures. Does this have that with the way they did, or did they actually remake the models and textures for this one?
No, it's pretty good. In terms of remasters, it's not the worst I've seen, for sure. But in general with remasters, I feel like games that are more stylized remaster better in terms of graphics, if we're just talking about graphics. Because if there's a stylistic approach, it ages better. If they were going for realism and then you bring it up to modern standards and we're used to a certain graphic fidelity and it's not there, you definitely feel it a lot more. Whereas like if you look back at like the Final Fantasy VII remaster that just launched, well, there've been a couple of them over time, but the latest one that just launched on Xbox and PS4. Oh, no, Xbox and Switch. Yeah, thanks. And same thing with like Final Fantasy IX, right? Like those ones are stylized in a way. They're not realistic looking. And I think that helps them a lot in terms of their graphics for the remasters.
Which is weird because like Final Fantasy VIII doesn't have a remaster, but it's got a PC version, which actually does have a high resolution setting in it. And it looks funky, because it's the more realistic kind that being a PS1 game being actually upscaled is makes those characters look like they have some strange faces.
Yeah, and well, I wanted to talk about like Final Fantasies in general because they're such a great example of remasters because there are so many of them. Like, yeah. They've been on, I mean, the PlayStation, I think you can get like every Final Fantasy game on it, but I've played them on a mix of like iOS device, and I played some on mobile, I played some on the original platforms, and then some I've come back around and like only played the remasters, or I've played different versions of it that I was emulating on my PC and like doing things to make them upscale, and like there's just such a variety of there. And you and I were talking about this last week, and I didn't realize that like the code from the PlayStation era it sounds like it was mostly lost, right?
Yeah, it's gone from what I understand. That Square didn't really have an archival process at that point, that they finished a game and they just moved on to the next project. And so that's why the Final Fantasy VII ports all look different, have kind of different pacing and setting, and not necessarily setting, but like graphical settings that make them look a little bit weird and look a little bit different. They'll have stutters and things like that because they're running on different code bases. They did it for Final Fantasy IX as well. You'll look at these new HD remasters and they have these really absolutely beautiful character models, and then you have just grainy, fuzzy, pre-rendered backgrounds because they don't have the original art anymore. They used to have these incredibly high definition, high resolution real art pieces that they came from, that they rendered them down to, and now that all we have is the compressed version for the PlayStation, because those originals aren't there anymore. It's terrible. Like, there's an article I'm going to include in the show notes about this that talks a bit more about it.
Well, like you and I were saying, like, poor Final Fantasy VIII, it's just gotten left out because they haven't seen enough of a business case for it yet to go through the trouble of rebuilding that code base from scratch, because they don't have that source code. Like, if they had the source code, I'm sure they would just, like, use that and remaster the game. But their options right now are to either, like, take the final files that they have and run them in an emulator. So that's like the PlayStation Vita versions of these games that you could get for PS Classics, that whole program. But there's no easy way to remaster these games like you would anticipate that there is.
Yeah, I mean, the absolute best that, I mean, obviously the best that you would do is probably emulate them at this point, but I mean, even trying to deconstruct the code and open up what's on the discs, and it's just too much trouble. It's entirely like trying to reverse engineer the source code of a 20-year-old game isn't worth them doing it. I mean, that's why the Final Fantasy VII remakes have taken such a long time to actually get right.
Well, and you'd think that eventually they'll go back to 8 just because, like, they want to remaster the whole collection, and it's one of the only odd ones out right now. But it's just like, when will they finally get to it?
Yeah, I mean, the only port that I know of is the PC port, and I grabbed it on Steam a while back just because it was super cheap, and I was like, I'm never gonna play it anywhere else, so I might as well get this, and because I've been wanting to replay it again, and I don't know where it came from, or I know Austin had told me that SquareEnix had basically said that it was a no-go, that they were not going to be doing Final Fantasy VIII, but I haven't seen the official tweets or article that came from. I just know that he was talking about it and a few other people were talking about it.
I hope they do eventually. It feels so weird because literally every Final Fantasy from 1 to 12 has a remaster except for Final Fantasy XI, because it's an online persisting game. So, like, that makes sense. You wouldn't remaster that, right? It's gotten updates over time. You just leave that alone. But the only one that's a single player RPG between Final Fantasy 1 and 12 that hasn't been remastered is 8.
Yep, and some of those have multiple remasters.
Oh yeah,
that's what's weird about the way that they've done some of these. It's not as though they're doing one HD remaster or one mechanics remaster or anything, and then moving that onto different platforms. They're making multiples of these that they're remastering it in the style of the original, and then they're remastering it with new graphics and new sprites, and then they're remastering it in 3D, kind of like they did with Final Fantasy III. I know they did that. I know that they've done that with the actual 3, not American 3. And then Final Fantasy IV, I know they did that with the After Years, where there's a 2D remaster of 4, then they did a different 2D remaster of 4 in the After Years that I know came out on the PSP or PS Vita 1, and then there is a full 3D remaster that you can get on mobile, which I think there might even be an After Years 3D remaster. I don't know if it is or not.
There might. I mean, I've only played the 3D mobile remasters of Final Fantasy 3 and 4. Like, that's the only way that I've ever played those games. And I've also only played the iOS version of Final Fantasy 5, which is a 2D remaster. So it's like, you're right. They just, like, they run the gamut. It's all these different approaches and all these different remasters, and 8 has been left out, which is interesting.
I mean, and when you think about it, even 14 got a remaster because they redid everything in Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, because they had overdone everything in kind of a demaster, actually, where they had such high polygon, like flora, and they had to take that down a notch and actually redo the maps, redo character models, redo everything for A Realm Reborn. So technically, even it got remastered before the release for a better version.
Yeah, and I mean, not to like stay on Final Fantasy too long, like you mentioned, Kingdom Hearts was another really good example, right?
I love the remasters that they've done for Kingdom Hearts. Like, they've got the most absurd names at this point, where I think now there's like it's either a complete saga or the complete story or the story so far, something like that, and where all of them are in one box. But I mean, you have Kingdom Hearts 1.5 and 2.8, or 1.5 and 2.5, and then 2.8, and then you have point 0.5, a fragmentary journey. Just their naming conventions are crazy, but those remasters are awesome. Like, I like the remasters because I don't know a lot of the technical aspects of any of the remasters that they've done. I haven't looked into the Kingdom Hearts remakes, but the ones that they have ported from like the 3DS and the PSP are better games than the originals. That they've had to change the control styles. They've had to do a lot of actual remastering of it that made them better. That it's not nearly as awkward to play now.
And that's cool. I love when they take some time to just like tighten up the controls or change the way some of the core controls work so that they meet modern standards. And I think that's a great thing to do when you're remastering a game. Well, and like, I mean, you said Dragon Quest is another one. I mean, a lot of this is Square Enix here up front, just because like they remaster so many of their games. They just go back to that well over and over again because there is so much nostalgia and so much love around these core series of theirs. I mean, it's really Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, and Dragon Quest are the main ones, right?
Yeah, and Dragon Quest, oh man, I'm sure Austin's going to do a blog on this at some point because he's the one actually playing through them and seeing them and comparing them and going Dragon Quest crazy. But like, they're weird the way that they do their Dragon Quest remasters. I mean, the graphics will improve in one of them. Like, they will take Final Fantasy, or not Final Fantasy, but Dragon Quest 3 was on the NES, and then they'll actually make a Super Nintendo remake of it. I think somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong, but I think they did that. And then like now there's a mobile version of it and a DS version of it, and then there was like a Game Boy Color version of things like that, and they combined them. But what they do on them is super weird, where they don't always remaster everything consistently. Like, the graphics may get improved in one of them, but the music end up being not orchestral anymore, or they might like that. Take away the voice track on one, but make the music orchestral, where it's like everything can't be like, they can't do an entire game once over. Like DQ7, like that one did not sell well on the PS1. Like, it was a 2D, 2.5D sprite based game, and it kind of got overlooked when it came out. And then they redid it for the DS and mobile. Now it's on mobile as well, where it's a dual screen, like rotating 2.5D full polygonal adventure that they redid. It's like 100-hour thing where they basically made a new game over it, kind of like they did with the Final Fantasy IV 3D remake. And the Final Fantasy 3 ones, but it's like even Dragon Quest 11 is kind of getting it with the Switch because they're remastering the Game Boy version. I put Game Boy Advance on here, on my notes, but the 3DS version of it is low def. I don't know. It's in 3DS graphics, but they're having to master it.
I know what you're talking about. So when they launched Dragon Quest 11 in Japan, there were two different versions. There's a PS4 game, which is a totally like 3D game. It's the same game that we got. And then there's a 3DS one where you have options for graphics, and like one of the options is 3D. It's like downscaled to fit on 3DS or something. Mm-hmm. But then you can flip it into this 2D mode and it plays like a traditional Dragon Quest game. So they made the entire game twice through two different perspectives, but they put it into the same game. And I think you can like freely switch between them mid-play.
I think that you can play them simultaneously. Like,
yeah,
I think
it's
that
really
the top
weird.
Can be 2D and the bottom can be 3D, and you're looking at both of them at the same time. Like, it's really strange. And it's like they're redoing that 2D and putting it in on the Switch. So you're getting HD sprites and everything, which they may already have made, but they're still doing it for Switch. But they're also cutting out quest lines and locations and a full party member, most likely, out of that because they're exclusive to the 3DS, because they use like Street Pass to pull things in. It's like, and the US version of the PS4 and PC had a voice track. Like, we had full voice acting. The Japanese versions didn't. And the Switch version is the one that's going to have full Japanese voice acting. It's like, I do not understand how Square Enix approaches Dragon Quest ports and remasters like this. It's like something is always missing. Like, there's never enough time or money to do everything and something has to be given up. Strange.
Well, I don't know. It's interesting too because like remasters are across the board, right? It's not just
Right.
SquareEnix, even though we're focusing on that here because there's so many good examples through them. But like Nintendo has done it too. You know, like Mario 64. There's a Mario 64 DS version.
Super
that's
weird
kind of
too.
Really weird. Yeah. There's a Star Fox 64 for 3DS, and that's a great remaster. It's like upscaled and ported, but like it's in 3D, and that is like the definitive version of that game in my mind at this point. And you know, there's like Metroid 2 for the GBA, and there's all of these like iOS ports too. You know, like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest are part of that, but there's stuff in there like Knights of the Old Republic. Like if you look on the iOS store, Knights of the Old Republic is consistently one of the top paid games in there, and that's BioWare, you know? Like there's so many companies doing so many remasters, and Ubisoft, right? They're like remastering their Assassin's Creed games. There's the whole Ezio collection that you can buy as one package, or now there's this remaster of AC3 that just came out the other week, and all these companies are doing it. So like in general, I want to talk about some of the big trends before we jump off this topic. And I think graphics is probably a good place to start because it's one of the most obvious. It's like they always update the graphics and it doesn't always work out well, I think is the best way to say it. So like Assassin's Creed 3, I kind of mentioned it up front, but it's kind of meh. Like it works. It's fine. I'm sure it's better in a lot of ways than when I played it a long time ago when it came out. But like there's something about the way it was upscaled and remastered that the faces and the eyes are just kind of like meh.
Yeah, the graphics when they do the it's mostly faces too. It's like it's like there's always something off about them, and it's not even Uncanny Valley kind of off. It's just something about that, and one of the problems, even other than that, are the animations that go with it. Because what looked really awesome before, you can tell are not nearly as smooth once you move them into side by side with modern games.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there's a certain look to remasters of those early 3D games. Like those specifically have this like remaster quality to them where it's obvious that they're at a better resolution and they're sharper, but because they've done that, something is lost because all the designs for the game were at that original lower resolution. And I don't know. I'm not enough of a technical person or graphics person or like game designer to be able to articulate it. So I won't stick with this point for very long, but it's a very certain look. And when you know it, and you see it and you're like, ooh, that's definitely remastered, upscaled something.
And I was watching something on YouTube the other day and now I can't remember what it was, but it was a game designer who got mad that their game got redone and remastered and said that that it was in widescreen, and they got mad that it was in widescreen. It was supposed to be in 4:3, and said that if you really want to play this game, then you play it in 4:3, not widescreen. And I cannot remember what I was watching and what game that was, but it stuck out to me because they were mad about the widescreen conversion. Well, and that's also the case with like DVD remasters. It wasn't a video game. It was DVD remasters, because Joss Whedon said that about the horrible, horrible remaster of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that they had to go like how you remaster a DVD is that they have to take the original footage and then go frame by frame and remake all of the color grading, all the special effects, things like that, because they're all generated at the lower resolution. And they apparently did the Buffy ones by algorithm, and you can see how the cropping went wrong, how just everything is destroyed in terms of scene setup, and just coloring. Like some scenes that were daylight or that were at night before are daylight now, and it's just insane. It was Joss Whedon who said that Buffy was meant to be in 4:3. That's how we directed this and shot it. It wasn't a video game remaster; it was a DVD remaster.
Yeah, it's so interesting though that like it applies to kind of any creative work that gets redone or remastered. But I mean, like games specifically, it's not even just visuals like we're talking about. Like UI updates are a huge thing, which I guess is partially graphics, but it's part of just like the user experience, I was thinking about like Final Fantasy VI on iOS. Well, like really all of the Final Fantasies on iOS, where they completely change the entire interface, and it's for the better because it fits the platform more.
Not on 6. I actually like the everything but 6's interface better. Like, I love Final Fantasy V's mobile interface. I didn't like 6 nearly as much because they had tried with the active time battle stuff with the actual commands moving up and down instead of giving you just a regular menu. I didn't like that nearly as much, and they changed the controller on it, the actual D-pad or stick or whatever you used on screen.
Yeah, 6 is probably one of the weaker ones of the 2D remasters. It's still better than like 1 and 2. I don't know if you've gone back and tried those.
Oh, no, I haven't played any of the remasters of 1 and 2 since the PS1.
Okay, and 1 and 2 are, I mean, they were some of the first remasters they did, so it makes sense they're a little weaker. 6 is definitely better than those, but I think you're right. Like 4 and 5 are probably some of the tightest remasters they've done on mobile, which is really interesting. And like
5 is awesome.
The UI stuff ties right into like gameplay updates too, in a lot of aspects. You know, some of it is like the UI bleeds over into the way you interact with the game. But sometimes it's like they straight up just like modernize the controls, like you were saying earlier. You know, I was looking at some of the Final Fantasy remasters that I'm thinking about picking up 7 or 9 because like they have new controls where you can actually use like the analog sticks. And that was something that I forgot, like when I played the PSP, or not PSP, PS Vita versions of these, and it played the original PS1 games. Like those didn't have analog stick support. Those were like totally D-pad games.
I go in and remap my Vita controls to the analog stick now, because you can actually go in on the special controls and make up, down, left, and right on the keypad be mapped to the analog stick. I do it in every game that I play that doesn't have analog support. I didn't realize how much I disliked the D-pad in games like that until I couldn't use the analog stick.
Yep, no, I did that exact same thing when I played through, I think I played Final Fantasy VII through 9 on the Vita, and I did that exact same thing where I mapped them. But like just knowing that they actually went and supported it the correct way, like that's awesome. That's great. Like it'll actually work with like an analog stick should now. And they do other things too, like they added boosts to the Final Fantasy games. So I know Final Fantasy VII and 9 both have versions where you can trigger these boosts to do things like instantly get full health or do full damage or like get a limit break just whenever you want. So if you want to replay the games for the story, which is kind of the point that I'm at now, like I've played through a lot of the Final Fantasy games multiple times. I don't know if I'm in a good headspace or if I have enough time to actually play through the games as they were created and push all the way through. But I wonder if I just go all in on cheating right at the beginning, because I've already done the gameplay. Like I know the gameplay. If I just want to re-experience the story, this might be a good way to do it. Just like limit break everything and just destroy the game but play it for the story instead.
That's true. You would not have to worry about any of the grinding for bosses. You wouldn't have to worry about any of that. Like I haven't got the 9 or the 7 remasters on anything. So like these boosts, are they just like menu options, kind of like in a Lego game or something?
I think that it's like core to the game where I don't know if you have to go into a menu and activate them one time, but as I understand it, like once you're in it, you just like click in both sticks, or you hit buttons that didn't exist on those old controllers, and it'll just like instantly like fill up all your limit break or like give you full health or do max damage or whatever it is that it does. It's basically just cheats built into the game.
That is awesome, because since Sekiro came out, I've seen so many people talking about difficulty and cheats and just also like difficulty settings. And a lot of people, I know the people our age, are all going in on, I'll cheat in the game if I'm not having fun. Or I just start out on easy mode. It's like, it takes me, like I've said before, the moment I stop having fun, I go to a guide that, or I lower the difficulty or something. Like I start out on normal, but the moment I'm not having fun anymore, it's not worth the frustration.
Yeah,
unless like Sekiro, like you said, it's like you're going to try it and you're going to do it. And then, you get better because that's what the game is. But I'm not banging my head against a wall because it's just poorly designed.
Well, and I mean, if you look at like the other Final Fantasy games on mobile, stepping back to like those that are slightly older, but they're still remasters, a lot of those have auto battle, which goes so far towards helping with the grind. Like I would not do the 4-job fiesta for Final Fantasy V every year the way that I do right now if auto battle did not exist. Like that's why I play that iOS version. Well, I also play it because my phone's in my pocket and it's always within arm's reach of me. That's a big part of it. But the other part is that auto battle is there, so I can just kind of zone out and just grind until I'm a high enough level, and then I can move on with the story. You know, it's another way to get over that hurdle of like, I don't necessarily want the challenge of like the gameplay outside of the boss battles. Those I still want to do, but I don't want to grind. Like, I've beaten that game, I don't even know how many times at this point.
Oh yeah, and most of the battles that I've done on Final Fantasy VI when I'm playing it on mobile, it was done with auto battle. Like, there's no point. Like, playing the Final Fantasy, I have Final Fantasy IX on the Vita that I need to go finish, but it hurts me that there's not auto battle on it. The same for what is the game that I didn't even play? Legend of Dragoon. Like, everyone tells me that this story and this game is wonderful, and I started playing it and it was a hard pass because the battles were so slow and they required actual attention. This is the same reason I didn't pick up Octopath Traveler, because I don't want every single random battle to be something that takes 15 minutes to go through or takes my full attention.
Well, it's interesting too, because they've like come around to putting those in their old games as they remaster it for some of them, but not all of them. But then if you look at what they did later going forward, so if you look at like Final Fantasy 13, that game is basically auto battle. You pick the strategy, but when you're actually in the fights, you just hit the A button and it picks all the best things for you.
Yep. That's it. I mean, it was honestly fun.
Yeah, I like that game. I like that game a lot more than most people do, I think. And maybe that's from playing it multiple times and coming to appreciate it for what it is instead of what I expected it to be. I probably like it more now than I did after my first playthrough, now having played through it multiple times.
You are one of the few people to play through 13 that I know to play through 13 more than one time.
Yeah, and like I said, I liked it better the second time. Well, and some of these games also not only like let you auto battle, but I know that 7, 9, and 12, those remasters, all of those have speed options where you can speed up the game to like 3 or 4 times the original speed. And that's another reason why I'm thinking about picking up these remasters on the Switch, is because that appeals to me a lot. I mean, I'm somebody who listens to podcasts on, 2.5 times speed, plus with the smart speed, taking out all the pauses between when people talk. Right. It's more like 3x speed. And I like that. I function well at those speeds. But the thing is, when it's built into the core of, because, okay, let me say, when I played through 12, I did this because it was an option in the emulator that I was using. You could crank it way up, but everything in the game speeds way up.
That's what I was about to ask, if it was just battles or if it was everything.
So another reason why these games are looking super appealing to me, these remasters that are just coming out right now, is because they built the speed options into the game, but they did it for just battles and movement so that you don't have to. I think it's probably text scroll speed too, if you want to go super fast. Nice. But it's not messing with the music. It's not messing with the sound effects. It's not messing with any of the other core pieces of the game that you actually want to interact with. Oh. So all of those are standard speed. But then all the things that you would want to fly past, you can go much, much faster.
I didn't know that 12 had this. Like, Austin and you are both like, every time 12 comes up, you're like, oh my God, play Final Fantasy 12. I'm the Final Fantasy 12 ogre. Ah.
I'm not like that. He's like that.
He's like that. You just keep telling me to play it because it's really good.
I don't know. It's worth having the context if you like Final Fantasy the way that I do. I'm glad I've played through it twice, but I don't know. There's a lot of rough edges around that game too, because it's a really strange middle ground of like almost a first-person MMO, but it's still like a single player, or not first person, sorry. It's like a single player MMO. It's like in that age of like where everything was going towards MMO.
Yep.
And this was a single player game, but they needed to get that MMO aspect. And then there's a whole piece of like programming in there that like functions like auto battle, where you don't actually have to do the battles yourself.
Yep.
And that was annoying for grinding, but I wonder if when you can speed it up 4 times speed, if it gets way better, because I could easily see that.
That's what I'm thinking, because when you say that you can change everything into like at 4 times speed, that would make so much of what made me dislike the game go so much easier because the traipsing back and forth really got to me. The slow not so much plotting battles, but deliberate battles. I just couldn't get into it. But with a speed option for gameplay and not just battles, that might actually keep me interested because I do want to know about this story.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe some of these are ones that you should check out. I mean, I'm tempted, even though I've beaten all these multiple times, like all of these quality of life things and like basically cheats that they've built into it, those are super appealing to me. And
yeah.
I guess like before we jump off the topic of remasters, playing through some remasters, especially again, Assassin's Creed 3 has been on my mind, but like I've played other remasters recently too. It makes me remember how far we've come in game design and modern game design and like how quickly we've come that far. And part of it is like finding out that I don't love certain older games as much as I thought I did, which is sad, but it's so interesting for context because like a game can be so built up in my mind and be amazing. And then when I go back and play it, I'm like, oh, I'm let down. This is not as good as I thought. And it just kind of completely shifts your view on games from that era, I think. And so you and I were talking about this, and for me, the best example is probably Ocarina of Time. Like, as much as I loved that game at the time, and I still think it's like one of the most important games for like gaming and gaming history, and when it came out and all the context around it, I could never play that game again. Like, it's just, I don't enjoy that game. I wish I did. I wish I still loved it as much as I did after my first playthrough, but it's just not a game for me. And you said Final Fantasy X is kind of like that for you.
Final Fantasy X, I'm just done with. Like, I loved this game. Like, I will never forget the wonderful times that I had in college sitting in my dorm room playing Final Fantasy X when it was brand new. But going back when I got my Vita playing the HD remaster, I realized that just kind of like you said about Kingdom Hearts 3, it is definitely a PlayStation 2 game. And there were things about that, just the entire, just its whole thing that wasn't for me anymore, like Ocarina of Time was for you, where I've heard about Ocarina enough that I'm not going back to it, that I have my copy sitting on my shelf where it is 100% complete. I'm good. I loved that game when I was 14 and it was brand new, and I'm not going to even attempt to relive that because I know it won't hold up.
That's probably a good idea. And okay, last thought here on remasters, because we've been going for a while, but looking at these and thinking about picking them up again has made me really like think about how I would like to see modern takes on some of these old techniques. Like, just because we have 3D models now and the default is make everything in 3D world, like I would really love to see what a modern take on the 3D models on top of pre-rendered backgrounds looks like. Because I've been looking at a lot of like gameplay videos and screenshots from the Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IX remakes, and I'm like, wow, I wonder how amazing they could make some of these things look if they took this and just did it to modern standards and did this as like the base of the entire game. And you were saying you're kind of the same way on 2D in general, right?
I'm the same way with 2D graphics. It's like if I have the opportunity to play a game that has 2D graphics and that's sprite based. I mean, I don't mean just that it's on a two-dimensional plane, that if something is sprite based, I much prefer it these days to a 3D game, but especially if it's a remaster or an older game, because I know it's going to hold up better. That there are very, very few games. Kingdom Hearts is really the only one that I can think of that has really fully held up. Like, it's definitely an older game, but it held up a lot better to me because of the stylistic choices that they've made, where if it's a 2D game, like going back and playing Wild Arms did not feel, the 3D was one thing, but the 2D part of it felt just as modern as any Zelda clone that's out there. And it's like I much prefer that, and I would love to see some pre-rendered backgrounds like that. Because with pre-rendered backgrounds, one of the things I've noticed going back and playing some remasters like Wild Arms 3 and is it Rogue Galaxy that Level 5 did?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think it's Rogue Galaxy.
Going back to that makes me really appreciate how far we've come in terms of camera work and graphics just in general. Like, the cell shading on it looks really cool, but the camera work and the way that you have to control it, and some of them where you have to hit the L and R buttons to rotate a camera is like, I don't want 3D graphics like that. Like this mechanic doesn't hold up because of you using 3D graphics. You should have just done this in 2D with a fixed camera. And pre-rendered backgrounds lets you do that, and it's beautiful, and it holds up better by far than a 3D polygonal world.
Cool. Awesome. Well, a lot of remaster thoughts. That went longer than I expected, but in a really good way. That was fun. If you guys have any like remasters that we didn't talk about, because there's so many out there that we should check out that we might not even be aware of, like send them our way. Like I will gladly look. I'm super interested in this topic at the moment.
Well, I know Austin actually really liked the Spyro remaster. He beat it very quickly. He loved it on the PS4. He got it for Christmas, and I watched him play part of it. Definitely looks like a Spyro remaster, but it still looked fun. In the link I'm including in the show notes about the Final Fantasy source code and everything, there's actually a screenshot of what one of the original HD pre-rendered backgrounds looked like and what's in the game right now, where it's been scaled down, and you can see the difference that was lost because they lost the original art. So that side by side is really cool. So y'all look at the notes and see that.
Oh, lost to history. Sad.
So sad.
Okay, with that, we should probably dive into our Geeky Off of the Week. Why don't you tell everybody about Patreon?
Well, guys, we have Patreon, and we would really appreciate you going over to patreon.com/geek2geekcast and seeing some of the rewards, tossing us a little bit of support. It goes to hosting the podcast, and that is what it does. We are not fat cats out to make the big bucks. So if you want to get some cool stuff like a new Discord role, some Reddit flair, anything like that, even tell us what to talk about on a podcast like we did with the Lit RPG episode a few weeks back, then you can go to patreon.com/geek2geekcast and support us, help us out a little bit.
Sweet. Around the network this week, Geektitude. Joe's still healing, but we're hoping that they'll be back soon with Geektitude. Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea, they talked about Love, Simon, which is like a book and a movie, and that was super interesting to listen to. Capsule J is streaming on Tuesdays from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern, and sometimes on Thursdays and weekends. And then Troidal, as always, is streaming on Thursdays, sometimes after dinner. The other thing that Troidal is in the middle of doing right now, which is super ambitious, is he launched a short-term podcast called Podcasters Assemble, and then in parentheses, probably. It's a crowdsourced Marvel hype podcast, and he's releasing daily episodes about each MCU movie right up to the release of Avengers Endgame. So it's really just running this month, but we want to give a shout out, and like, if you have any interest in the MCU or Marvel or comics or anything, go check it out. It's called Podcasters Assemble, probably. And I'm so excited to start hearing these episodes. They're just coming out as we're recording this.
And as we're recording this, I have to throw it in while we're talking about that Rob made a really strange choice for part of his, and it was a goof, but apparently he called Samuel L. Jackson Nicolas Cage at one point in it, and I just think that's funny. That
okay.
I don't know if it's going to make it into the final episode, but just that I saw a message in Slack about it where it's that's a good mistake, and I had to tell everybody.
Wow. Okay, with that, it's time for Weekly Geekery, where we share what we've been geeking out about this week. What'd you do this week?
So Crazy Ex-Girlfriend had its series finale. The show was over. All 4 seasons are now done. It finished up this week. And it is one of the few shows that I can honestly say stuck the landing. I was really hesitant at the beginning of the season, and honestly all the way through the season until the penultimate episode, that they were gonna really kind of just handle it wrong, and they didn't. It was one of the best series finales I've seen. They actually wrapped things up. They did things with characters, and they didn't cop out on things. It's very rare for a finale to not cop out on some things, and I think they actually did a very good job in terms of making sure that everyone I don't even want to say everyone, because these characters in the show, like, this show means way more to me than I expected it to. But the just everybody got a conclusion. I don't even want to say an ending, because that's the entire point of it, is that it's not an ending, but people live their lives, and everybody goes through these things, and none of it's an ending per se. And it's just, they handled it so well. I can't speak highly enough that when you get a complete show that tells a complete story and they don't botch the ending, it is a rare thing. And I think that if you are into musical shows or into like mental health and dealing with like relationships and things like that, you should watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And Jennifer actually gave me one of my Valentine's Day presents the night of the finale. Apparently, she had gone through a website that you can request video messages from actors and actresses, and she got Gabriela Ruiz to record me a video for finale night to talk to me, and that was so sweet. It was just wonderful. So I was very happy and confused when Jennifer showed me a video of Gabriela Ruiz, who plays Valencia, to start talking to me. It was odd, but I really, really loved it.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. And she had been trying to get a voice message, a video message from, as she put it, from a pretty lady to me since we watched Lost. She was supposed to get Evangeline Lilly to do it. There were scheduling conflicts with the program that was doing it. And as a replacement, they sent me a pilot script of Lost signed by the entire cast, which honestly I would rather have. Like, it's super awesome. And but 10 years later, she's able to get me a video message from a pretty lady. And so that was awesome. And so Wild Arms, I've also been doing that. You know, I told you last week that I was probably going to play it through to completion, and I'm stopping right now. I'm almost exactly halfway through the game, and I'm taking a hiatus because of one particular reason that I did not know. I hate random battles so much now. Have you played an RPG recently that has just random battles?
Yeah.
They're the worst.
I'm not a fan either. They don't feel right. They just feel like they waste time now. And I can get over it for some of the legacy games I go back to, like Final Fantasies specifically, but random battles are the reason that I haven't replayed Final Fantasy games more than I have already. I basically have to psych myself up every year getting ready for the 4-Job Fiesta because there's so many random battles. And the way I get over it is I listen to podcasts or I watch TV or whatever while I'm grinding. And then when I actually like go through a dungeon, I pay attention. And, you know, I can do that because I have it on my phone. My phone's always with me. I just mute the sound. I don't actually hear any of the sound in the game, so I can listen to a podcast while I'm playing. Or I'll just, like I said, I'll put on a show or a movie or something that I want to catch up on, and I'll just like go back and forth with auto battle and just like let the grind happen. Yeah. But I am so much more appreciative of Bravely Default and any other thing like Bravely Default that has given you options to turn random battles off or up or down yes. or like, because what I did in Bravely Default was I would crank it way up and then I would just grind in a section for a little bit while I was doing other things similarly, you know, TV, movies, whatever. And then when I was ready to progress, I would turn random battles off. And then I would actually just like play the game and like do the story and like get to the next boss battle and all that kind of stuff until I was ready to level up again. And then I would kind of switch over into that mode.
Yep. If they ever got on my nerves, I would just turn them off for a little bit and finish that dungeon or get across the desert or wherever I was going. And it was great being able to do that. This one I couldn't because it's a PlayStation 1 game. I got so frustrated. Like I just had to stop. But right before I stopped, I got the spell to lower the encounter rate. So, but it was too late. I was already frustrated and being like, no. And when I start back, it will be amazingly helpful because I am going to go back to this. But it was like, no more random battles. No more random battles with no auto battle. I think that it is honestly one of the reasons that Chrono Trigger holds up so well compared to every other RPG of that time is because it doesn't have random battles. It has encounter battles where you walk into an area and you can't help but get into the fight, but it doesn't have random overworld battles like what we're talking about. And even though some of those are completely unavoidable, it's different. You're not just trying to do something to get to the end of the room and get attacked, and then you get attacked again just because of just randomness, because of RNG. It's not good. Bad design.
Yeah, for sure.
It actually made me, when Austin and I are working on this Stratus RPG, that we decided to do the same thing, like not do random battles, but have placed enemies on the map. Like we're not doing random battles because they're terrible. That said, you know, I didn't even put this on the list, but yesterday, as of this recording, we're recording on Tuesday, so Monday of this week was the 6-year anniversary of us releasing Nimbus out on as an omnibus, the full novel that we did. So it was crazy that it's been that long. I don't even feel like it's been that long, but we geeked out about that for a little bit and put up a screenshot from this game and everything. But we were so excited that it was 6 years ago that we got to the number one on the Amazon steampunk list.
I still think that's so cool.
So cool. But, last week we were talking about impulse buys, and I told you that I was probably not going to, that I wanted to impulse buy Legend of Heroes, wanted to impulse buy Trails in the Sky, and I hadn't yet. But then I got mad at Wild Arms, and I bought it. I bought Trails in the Sky for the Vita, and I was like, I'm going to play this. Everybody says it's wonderful, and it's so good. Have you played this? I don't.
Maybe. I might have rented it and bounced off it really quick. I've never really given a Legend of Heroes game a true shot beyond the first couple hours.
It's odd in that the on Steam, the synopsis that you get of, this is happening, this is what's going on, here's the setup. I'm 6.5 hours into the game right now, and it has just gotten to the point where what happened in the synopsis to tell you for the setup is done. And I love it. Like, you can see the love that they've put into this world and the world building. It's the most detailed of any RPG world I've ever seen. Like, it's just insane. And the battles are a mix between tactics battles and like Chrono Trigger battles. You can see the enemies on the world, but you get in there and it's almost a mini tactics RPG where positioning matters, but you can just hit attack and it runs up and attacks the nearest thing. Like, it's really good. It's kind of like Lunar, where positioning mattered, but you didn't actually get to move around like you wanted. I can totally see why Grant has been wanting me to play this, and so many other people love this. The writing is just good. Like, that's one thing that struck me from the beginning. As soon as I started it, the people were talking like people, and it was like, oh, they have writers and translators who know what they're doing. Okay, and then I kept playing it, and I'm gonna lose the next 600 hours of gameplay to this series. It's like, I watched a YouTube video a while back that said it was like a giant 600-hour RPG on its own, like once you take all of the pieces and put them together. And I can totally see that now. Just 6 hours in, I'm like, man, I'm not even scratching the surface. Like, I've still been in the first town until I turned it off this morning to go to work. Like, it's one of the best impulse buys I've ever made.
Wow. Okay, I'm super curious now to see if you stick with it over the next few weeks.
Me too, because I get like this occasionally, but this one has that feeling like I did when I started Xenoblade 2, where I was like, nope, this is mine, and it's really cool so far.
Okay. Well, good. I want to hear more about it. I hope you stick with it and you actually like it as much as you think you do.
Me too.
Okay, cool. This week I went to see a museum exhibit, and I don't know how to talk about that and make it interesting, but I bring it up just to say, if you guys ever get the opportunity to go see Sunken Cities of Egypt, if it's at a museum near you, you should, because it's really, really good.
Cool.
I went to see it at Minneapolis Institute of Art, so that was fun. I played this little game called Golf Peaks on iOS, which is it's a couple bucks. It's a paid game, but I don't know, it's like a fun little low-key golf puzzle game with cards. So it's like a turn-based puzzle game. And you're just trying to get the ball in the hole. I mean, it's simple, but it gets complex too because of all the different things you can do with it. So that was kind of cool. I found a new podcast called 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy, which is exactly what it sounds like. And it's really interesting, but it's not much more than it sounds like. It's just 50 things that made the modern economy. It's self-explanatory, but it's good, and they're short. That's the other thing I should mention. Most podcasts that I listen to are long, or they're people talking or having an interesting conversation like we try to do for you every week. This one is more the presentation style, where they come with a thing prepared, and it's not necessarily a read off a piece of paper or news, but it's definitely they have a thing, they're going to read through it, and then you're going to be done. And so every one is 10 minutes at max, which is really cool. Some of the things that I actually spent a bunch of time on this week, I finally got into Elder Scrolls Blades, which has been in open beta, or not open, but alpha or beta or something where it launched on iOS, but you couldn't play it unless they gave you like approval to get into it. It was in this really weird state for a couple weeks there. And it's finally, I think, open to everybody. But I got in a couple days before it opened to everybody. And it's, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to stick with it long term, but I've been playing it consistently for most of this week, which is a good sign. The core of the game is like you go into a dungeon, you like do the dungeon crawl to complete the quest, and then you leave and you just go from the town to the dungeon. There's no like open world like an Elder Scrolls game normally is. And you're trying to rebuild your town because the town was destroyed, and you're trying to explore dungeons because it's fun. I mean, it's dungeon crawler. That's what the game is at its core. That's okay. I think it's okay. I don't know if it's enough is the problem. There's a lot of cool features around it. You can play it vertically or you can play it horizontally. So if it's vertically, you can like tap on the ground to walk to places like you can in like a Diablo type game. You know, you just click to walk. If you have it horizontal, you can use it like two digital like analog sticks, you know, in the corners of your screen. And that's how I've been playing it a lot when I'm actually in a dungeon and I want to see a lot wider because the screen is so much wider if you have it horizontal.
Right.
But you can, whenever you want, you can switch back and forth between the two. You literally just tip your phone and the whole game rotates and all the controls change, which I thought was super cool because that's not always the case in games.
No, it's not. That means that they actually thought this game out a little bit.
They did because, yeah, like I'm, you know, every once in a while I'll like play a game over lunch at work. And it's like I can hold my phone vertically like I'm doing anything. Like no one knows what I'm doing on my phone. Whereas if you have it horizontally and you're doing like some analog sticks, people are like, oh, you're playing a game. Not that I care that much, but you know, it's one of those things where if I'm like, oh, I'll just jump in and play a dungeon, sometimes I'll leave it vertical. I keep switching back and forth. It's just cool that you have that ability to do that. And then it's probably one of the best looking games that I've seen on a phone. And it doesn't destroy my battery to do it, which is just amazing to me. Like the quality of the graphics look to me like PS like 3 and Xbox 360, like they're of that quality, but they're on the phone. Yeah, it's super impressive. I don't know if there's enough meat there yet. Like I want another week with it. But the combat is like you hold down your thumb and then when the timing happens, you let go and it'll like swing your weapon to do damage. And then there's another button that if you haven't attacked super recently, you can like hold up a shield to block. And if you block at the right time, it acts more as like a parry and it stuns them. And then there's a whole thing around like you have abilities that can build out for stamina and you have magic that can build out for magicka. Like some of the core Elder Scrolls stuff is there. I just don't know if the core of the combat is fun enough to drag you through the game. Because outside of that combat and those dungeon crawls, there's not a whole lot else there.
That is a completely different game than I thought it was. I thought it was a card game. I thought it was Hearthstone.
There is an Elder Scrolls card game, but it's not this one.
Okay, I did not know that this game existed. I thought that everything everybody was talking about was the card game. I am completely ignorant of this game, so I'm going to have to look into this one.
Okay, you should check it out and let me know what you think because you also have thoughts about the Elder Scrolls. So maybe we can talk about it more next week.
Yeah, because I avoided it because I just assumed, I was like, I'm not in the mood for a card game and never even looked at it because I didn't know that this particular game was in development. I thought it was just the card game.
So
I feel like
let's talk about card games for a second because the other thing I've been playing a lot this week is Magic the Gathering Arena. And I'm super surprised that I'm playing this game because I've played Magic over the years, right? Like in person with other people. I've never really bought my own Magic cards. Like I've never been that person, but my brother's been into it. So, you know, he has decks and we'll play those together. Like if he constructs them, and I've had tons of other friends that have like constructed Magic decks that they'll bring and I'll play. And something about it has always been frustrating to me. And I think this week was the first time I got my head around what it was. And that has made all the difference. My frustration was that there is way too much possibility space in the game of Magic. Like there are so many things that can happen on so many different phases at so many different points of the turn that it always feels like somebody can just do anything to you that you didn't even know was possible. And I hate that. And so because like, I mean, Hearthstone, like when things go bad, it's like, okay, but I knew that was possible for that to go bad, you know, and then you move on with your day. Whereas Magic, it feels like people are cheating, even though they're not. It's just that there's so many cards and so many different interactions that those cards can have after this game's been around for like 25 years or something.
Oh man. May even be longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know they retire cards and they get new cards and they change things and they balance it, but it's just like, I have never got my head around the possibility space. So what I started doing is my brother encouraged me to get back into Magic the Gathering Arena, which is the digital version, because I'm not going to get into the physical version. I mean, you guys know that enough about me. I don't want to just collect things to have things. And as you laugh, it's that I'm picking away at it slowly, and I'm only using the starter deck, so it only pairs you up against other people who are using like low-level decks, and that's making a world of difference. I don't have to worry about getting like surprised by something that I didn't even know was possible. And then as I'm starting to like tiptoe out of this like safe little newbie space, what I was doing was I would have my brother watch me, like I would stream it just to him on Discord, and he would watch me and then tell me things that I would have no idea about. So he'd be like, you should be thinking about this because XYZ can happen. Or you should play this card because if you think to next turn, think about these other things. And he's basically just being like a player coach to me. And I can only do this in short bursts is the other thing I realized. Like typically if I get into a digital card game, I will play it for long sessions because I really enjoy that. But with Magic the Gathering Arena, I am only playing in, I think the most I played in one burst was like 30 minutes. There's a lot of the time where I'm doing other stuff on my computer, or I'm going to go play a game on the Switch or on my phone or something. And like before I start that, I'll go and I'll sit down at my computer and I'll play one game of Magic Arena, and then I'll move on. And that seems to be the way that I'm able to get into it, because I don't get frustrated with the possibility space surprising me if I'm only playing one or two games at a time. So I wanted to bring it up because like as much as Magic has been around me and in front of me so many times over the years, it has never clicked with me. And I don't think I'm far enough into Magic the Gathering Arena to say that it's clicked with me, but it feels like it might, and that's really strange for me.
And it's so odd in my mind of it being the possibilities and having all of this stuff, because that's what I like about Magic. I like that I can go in and not really know what to expect out of somebody, because whenever I'm playing Hearthstone, that's one of the things that has kept me from playing it lately, is it's always going to be the same meta deck. And it while it gets that way in Magic, especially if you're playing in tournaments and high level things like that and going to states, it's definitely it's way more open, at least in my experience, from where some of the online card games were, and that's what I like about it. So it's odd that it is completely different.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's encouraging me to try to stick with it, even if I don't. But this is why I keep going back, is that I just reached the point where I'm seeing the edges of like how big the possibility space of the game is. And because of that, I know that if I can get into it, there is so much there to get into that's just waiting for me to learn about it.
Yes.
And there are systems and there are complex interactions and there are the things that I like. I just need to learn enough to get over the frustration stage to be able to get into the like, oh, I'm super interested in this stage. The other thing I should mention is that the new player experience for it has changed. And I know this because I played the beta like a long time ago, and it might still technically be in beta, but it's like much farther along. I think it might be fully released. I don't know. It's one of those games where it's really hard to tell. And my brother was telling me about like, because he's played it a lot since it came out. He was telling me about how the old one was, which was, there wasn't a whole lot to it. But now like as you win games, you unlock these spheres that there's like a mini sphere grid for your first however many levels in the game. And as you like put these spheres on the sphere grid, it will unlock like a bunch of cards at a time. So you get like 6 cards that'll enhance one of your decks, one of your like starter newbie decks.
Awesome.
So there's just a button that like after you unlock it, you just hit a button that says upgrade my deck, and it'll just put those cards in and take out other cards. So like even though I'm still playing the newbie decks, they're changing over time and they're getting more complex, but they're getting more complex slowly, and I don't have to worry about building them. The game is building them for me. And I also see that if I fill out enough of the sphere grid with these like magic spheres from leveling up, I will reach the point where it will start unlocking like some pre-made multicolor decks that look super interesting too.
That's really cool. That's kind of the way that the Pokemon online card game was doing, where you had these basic pre-made decks that you could play, and then you win a certain number with them and you unlock new cards that actually, you know, give you evolutions and more strategies to play, and it worked really, really well. So I'm glad to see that Arena has taken that, because that was one of my favorite things about the online thing, was not having to invest a lot and having a good pool of cards and something fun to play with.
Yeah, and I do think it's still technically in beta because there are things missing from this game. Like, there's no friend list. And they just recently gave you the ability to play against other people that are not play against other people. You could always do matchmaking. They just gave the ability very recently to be able to do a match against somebody if you know their username. So like my brother and I were playing against each other as he's trying to teach me, but I have to like manually go in and type in his username and hit a button to connect with him. So the only way to do it is if you're coordinating outside the game. Like there's no chat in the game. There's no friends list in the game. There's no way to actually coordinate it from in the game. But if you're on Discord together, it's super easy to be like, oh, here's my thing. Let's play around.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
That's definitely a feature that's missing.
Yeah, it's still beta-y. So this is probably one I'm going to try to pick away at and just keep on doing a little bit at a time. If it hooks me, I'm sure you'll hear more about it because as we all know, there is a ton to Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, there's so much. I was so deep into Magic the Gathering for so many years that my wallet thanks me for not doing that. Once I had to start paying for cards on my own was about the time that all of my friends moved out of it. So it was like serendipity. But man, I love Magic the Gathering.
That sounds about right. Well, maybe I can drag you into the arena and we'll try it out together.
I've been meaning to install it since you've mentioned it the very first time. It's always on my like to-do list of installing it and playing it. It just has never hit the top of my my list when I'm looking at things.
Well, it feels like it should be on mobile too. Like it'll be a really good fit whenever they get around to that point, but I guess it's still just a single beta client on Windows, which is, it's okay. But again, I don't want to sit down in front of a computer and play a game, like a card game for super long. I'd rather play it on a tablet or on my phone or something. So I hope that comes down the line too.
That would be fantastic. I would totally be playing it then.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll drag you into it since I'm playing it in little bits and pieces.
Maybe so.
That's probably it for this week. You guys can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or you can reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
We also have great discussions on Slack and Discord, so go to geek2geekmedia.com for invite links, and you can hang out with us and check out all the other shows and blogs on the network.
I blog at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's, and I'm blogging at the Media Network site above.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye, geeks. By the power of Grayskull, that Void doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea, and we are the hosts of Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. We are two best friends who love pop culture and talking about pretty much whatever we want. Katie!
Yes?
Stop thinking about Zac Efron and tell our future listeners what some of our latest episodes have been about.
Well, we've talked about Zac Efron.
No, get it together, Katie.
Fine. We've talked about fan fiction, classical literature adaptations, favorite TV couples, and so much more. So grab your cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is and download our podcast today.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.
Hello friends, this is Troidal Power inviting you to join me over on Twitch most weeknights, sometime after dinner. Video games have always been a social hobby for me, with friends and family crammed together on a couch chatting away while someone holds the controller. And thanks to the power of the internet, I've got my own virtual couch over on Twitch where you can kick back and goof off while I play games. Find me on Twitch by searching Troidal Power, that's TROYTLE Power, to snag a spot on the couch.